version of Egypt, full of spectacle and mystery, but the slower one. The Egypt of river mud cooling after sunset, the Egypt of scribes grinding ink, farmers watching the Nile, and temple lamps burning softly against painted stone. Ancient Egypt lasted for an astonishing span of time. If we begin with the early dynasties around 3100 BCE and move forward to the age of Cleopatra in the 1st century BCE, we are looking at roughly 3,000 years of changing rulers, languages, borders, beliefs, and artistic styles. That is difficult to imagine. The distance between Cleopatra and the building of the Great Pyramid was already greater than the distance between Cleopatra and us. At the centre of Egyptian life was the Nile. The river was not just scenery, it was the engine of the civilization. Each year, the Nile flooded, spreading rich, dark silt across the land. This made farming possible in a desert environment. Egyptians called the fertile land Kemet, the black land, because of the dark soil. Beyond it was Tishret, the red land, the desert. Life gathered along the narrow green ribbon between those two worlds. The river also connected the country. Boats moved grain, stone, papyrus, officials, soldiers, priests, and stories. The Nile flowed north toward the Mediterranean, while the prevailing winds could help boats travel south. In this way, the river became a road, a calendar, and a source of order. Egyptian kingship was built on that idea of order. The pharaoh was not simply a political leader. He was imagined as a sacred figure responsible for maintaining Ma'at, a word that can mean truth, balance, justice, and cosmic harmony. Ma'at was the proper arrangement of things. The sun rose, the Nile returned, offerings were made, and society continued. When we think of ancient Egypt, we often think of pyramids. The Great Pyramid at Giza was built during the 4th dynasty for Pharaoh Khufu. It was not built by alien visitors or by a nameless crowd of enslaved people, as older myths sometimes suggested. Archaeology points to large, organized labor teams, including skilled workers, administrators, food suppliers, and seasonal laborers. The pyramid was a national project requiring planning, mathematics, logistics, and belief. But Egypt was much more than pyramids. It was a world of towns, workshops, gardens, granaries, schools, river docks, and family homes. Most people were farmers. Their lives followed the agricultural year, the flood season, the growing season, and the harvest. They grew wheat and barley, kept cattle and goats, brewed beer, baked bread, and paid taxes in labour or produce. Scribes held a special place. Writing opened a path into administration, religion, law, and memory. Egyptian writing included hieroglyphs, used especially for monumental and sacred texts, and more practical scripts, such as hieratic for everyday documents. To be a scribe was to belong to the machinery of the state. A scribe could record grain, copy literature, draft letters, and preserve names. Egyptian art was not trying to capture a quick moment in the way a camera might. It was often trying to express permanence. Figures were shown according to rules: head in profile, eye facing forward, shoulders frontal, legs in profile. These conventions helped make the image complete and legible. In tombs, images of food, servants, gardens, boats, and offerings were not was deeply important. Egyptians imagined that a person was made of several parts, including the body, the ka, and the ba. Preserving the body through mummification helped preserve identity. Tombs, spells, amulets, and offerings all played roles in preparing for the journey after death. One famous image from the Book of the Dead shows the weighing of the heart. The heart of the deceased is weighed against the feather of Ma'at. If the heart is balanced, the person may continue into a blessed afterlife. It is a quiet image but powerful, a life measured against truth and balance. Temples were not simply places where ordinary people gathered for weekly worship. They were houses of the gods, maintained by priests and supported by estates, workshops, and offerings. At Karnak, Luxor, Abu Simbel, and countless smaller sites, stone architecture created a path from sunlight into shadow, from the public world toward the hidden sanctuary. Egypt changed many times. It had periods of unity and fragmentation, native rule and foreign rule, expansion and retreat. Nubians, Persians, Greeks, and Romans all became part of its later story, yet certain patterns remained recognizable. The Nile, the sacred king, the written word, the concern for order, the hope that something of a person might endure. So when we look at ancient Egypt, we are not looking at one frozen civilization. We are looking at a long conversation across centuries, a civilization that built in stone because it thought in eternity, but lived every day beside water, crops, work, family, and the soft return of the river. And now, as this small lecture closes, imagine the Nile under a dark blue sky. A boat drifts slowly past reeds. Somewhere, a lamp is being covered. Somewhere, a scribe sets down a reed pen. The desert is cooling. The river continues north, carrying silence, memory, and moonlight. Before we leave Egypt completely, we can linger for a few more quiet moments with the details that made this civilization feel so continuous. One of those details is time itself. Egyptians watched the movement of the sun, the stars, and the river. Their calendar was closely tied to the Nile flood and the agricultural year. The rising of the star Sirius, which the Greeks called Sothis, was associated with the coming inundation. In this way, the sky and the river seemed to speak to one another. The Egyptian day was also shaped by work that left traces in the archaeological record. We find bread molds, beer jars, weaving tools, cosmetic palettes, sandals, combs, toys, and jewellery. These objects remind us that ancient Egypt was not only a civilization of kings, it was also a civilization of households. People cared about appearance, comfort, children, food, music, humour, and rest. They decorated homes, repaired tools, wrote letters, and worried about practical things. Music and celebration mattered too. Tomb paintings show harps, flutes, clappers, dancers, and banquets. Festivals could bring sacred images out from temple spaces, allowing communities to gather along processional routes. These public moments joined religion, politics, and ordinary emotion. A festival might involve offerings and hymns, but also food, drink, and the feeling of being part of something larger than one household. Craftsmanship was another quiet foundation of Egyptian life. Stonecutters, painters, carpenters, jewelers, potters, and metal workers translated belief into material form. statue might provide a resting place for the car. Even practical objects could be shaped with care. The Egyptian sense of order was not only written in temples, it was worked into wood, linen, faience, gold, and stone. Egypt's relationship with neighbouring regions was also important. The civilization was never sealed away from the world. Trade and contact connected Egypt with Nubia, the Levant, the Mediterranean, and lands farther south and east. Gold, incense, timber, copper, lapis lazuli, ivory, and other goods moved through networks of exchange. Ideas moved too. Egypt influenced others, and others influenced Egypt. When we imagine ancient Egypt, it is tempting to picture only stillness, monuments under a hot sun. But ancient Egypt was also motion. Boats moved, floodwater rose, priests entered sanctuaries, workers hauled stone, children learned signs, farmers waited for the soil to dry enough to plant. The civilization endured because countless ordinary actions were repeated year after year. There's a gentle lesson in that. The most famous monuments survive because they were built to resist time, but the civilization itself depended on rhythms, the river, the seasons, the workday, the ritual, the meal, the family line, the name spoken aloud. Eternity for the Egyptians was not simply endless time, it was time placed in order. So, if you are listening with your eyes closed, imagine one final image. A small lamp glows beside a painted wall. Outside, the desert is silent. Beyond the fields, the Nile reflects the stars. A person dips a reed pen into ink and writes a name carefully, because to write a name is to help it remain. The ink dries, the lamp flickers, and the night keeps the lesson softly. And as a final quiet recap, remember the main threads of tonight's lecture. Ancient Egypt was shaped by a river, protected by desert, organized through kingship, and remembered through writing. Its people built monuments, but they also baked bread, kept accounts, played music, raised children, and watched the seasons. Its art sought permanence. Its religion cared deeply about continuity. Its history changed over thousands of years, but again and again it returned to balance, order, and the hope that names, bodies, and stories might endure. That is why Egypt remains so powerful in the imagination. It gives us stone and sand, but also tenderness, a comb, a toy, a loaf of bread, a painted garden for the next life. These small things let the ancient world breathe. One last path through Egypt takes us along the river at night. On one bank are fields, cut into dark shapes by irrigation channels. On the other is the desert, pale under the moon. Between them is the narrow place where people made a civilization. This contrast mattered deeply. The fertile land was fragile and precious. The desert was dangerous, but it also preserved. Tombs, bodies, paintings, papyri, and objects survived partly because dry sand kept them from decay. The desert also shaped imagination. The West, where the sun set, became associated with death and the afterlife. Necropolises were often placed on the western side of the Nile. Each evening, the sun seemed to descend into another world, and each morning it returned. This daily cycle offered a natural image of renewal. So ancient Egypt's hope was not simply that nothing would change, it was that change could be guided into return. Flood after drought, dawn after night, breath after silence, memory after death. That hope is part of why ruins still feel so quiet and magnetic, they are not only remains, they are messages about endurance. I want to thank you for listening to Whisper University. If you made it all the way to the end, I'm very glad you are here. I hope tonight's quiet lesson helped you relax, learn something new, or simply drift for a little while in a calmer direction. If you enjoyed this whispered lecture, you can support Whisper University by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, or leaving a gentle comment with a topic you would like to hear next. It helps this little university grow and helps us keep making the world a little more relaxed and a little more curious through ASMR. Until the next quiet lesson, take care, breathe slowly,